Jesus went on with his disciples to the village of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others, Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." May God add wisdom and understanding to the reading and the hearing of these words. Amen. The sermon today is called Taming the Beast. And if you remember what was just said in James, we have quite a beast to deal with, each and every one of us. This is a reminder. This isn't something pointing out to somebody that specifically we have a problem, but it's to make sure that each of us look at what we're getting ready to say at times and how we say it. It seems that over the past several months, and actually the past several weeks, the media has been having quite a heyday with Christians, more specifically the Catholic Church and what's going on there. But it's not the only religious organization that is being hit. We have an organization where the leading pastor wants a new business jet. The other 3 aren't satisfactory enough. There's things like that are going on. And we hear that and we see that in our news every day about these types of things. But it's not what's causing folks to push away from the Christian church. It happens to be the hypocrisy of what goes on in the Christian church by what we say and what we do. We don't necessarily follow our words. We don't necessarily speak what God is telling us to do. That's why the scripture of James today is something that we need to remember about. We need to remember what is in what we talk about. Are we getting ready to talk about somebody in a mean or spiteful manner? Is that something that we should be doing? Are we getting ready to say hurtful, swear words, whatever to people? We need to start looking at what we say to each other and to others. Sometimes we treat strangers better than we treat our friends and family in the way we talk in our words. Sometimes it's the other way around. Go down the road, somebody cuts you off. It's very easy to say something that, as long as we're safe. Maybe we need to bite our tongue a little bit not say something to that driver that just cut us off. Let them go about it. It doesn't matter if we're in a small town, a medium city, or a large metropolitan area. Each one of those can be cruel places if people act and say things that are cruel. What we sometimes think is harmless gossip sometimes can be the most cruel thing that can occur. Because we don't necessarily think about how what we're saying is being received by the person that is hearing, or by the person that hears it from someone else. The havoc that the tongue can wreak is monumental. It is the tongue, as we will learn today, that can either build things up or tear them down. A beast is too frequently out of control. As Christians, we are admonished to tame that beast, and rather than inflicting pain or wounds, use it to build God's kingdom. There are 3 truths about the tongue from James. The first truth is that the tongue is small but powerful. The author of James begins chapter 3 by speaking of the power of the tongue. He says that if you could find someone whose speech was perfectly true, in other words, if you could find someone who knew how to control his or her tongue all the time, who never said anything wrong, then you would have a perfect person in perfect control of life. And as each one of us knows, there was only one. I do not know about you, but my biggest mistakes are the ones I make with my mouth most of the time. Saying something I shouldn't say, and my wife can attest to it at times. It's an extremely powerful instrument, my tongue. Just like the bit in the mouth of the horse that guides its entire body, or the small rudder on a ship that directs the ship, so the tongue, even though it is a small part of our body, is perhaps the most powerful part. Why did God give us 2 ears? He wanted us to hear more than to speak. We have 1 mouth, we have 2 ears. Let's hear more than speaking. The second truth about our tongue is that we find in this passage is found in verse 5 through 8. The author says, "How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. The tongue is placed among our members as a world of iniquity. It stains the whole body, sets on fire the cycle of nature, and is itself set on fire by hell. For every species of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature, can be tamed and has been tamed by the human species, but no one can tame the tongue. A restless evil full of deadly poison. The tongue is small but dangerous." As kids, we used to respond to insults and hurtful words of others by saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." Whoever said that could not have been more wrong. I know they were trying to deflect what was being said, but broken bones heal much quicker than the words that are left by an out-of-control tongue. We can do a lot of damage to people by what we say. We've all been there. We've all been hurt by words of others, and we've all hurt others with our words. Most of the time, not intending to, but sometimes we do intend to hurt someone. I do not know about you, but I'd rather have someone come and slap me than to have them cuss me out. The third truth about the tongue from James is that it's a small but revealing. In verses 9 through 12, the author of James points out that just as fresh water does not come from salt water, and olives do not come from fig trees, so too blessings cannot come from the same mouth that curses come from. It cannot be so. In addition, do you know why? Listen to what Jesus had to say in Matthew 12. The tree is known by its fruit. Think about that. If the tree is known by its fruit, and we're known by what we say, guess what? That can be a bad thing or a good thing, depending on what we're doing. People know what is in you by what comes out of you. If you claim to be a follower of Christ, but the things that you do and the way that you talk does not match that claim, then you're not fooling anyone. I can tell you what is the heart by listening to your speech. If you're being kind, considerate, and helpful, you're a follower of Christ. If you're cursing, gossiping, you got some work to do. A good heart will not produce bad fruit. The tongue has a way of revealing who we really are. I do not think of any of us would deny that we have problems with our tongues. Some of us struggle more than others. And this is a reminder. This isn't anything specific about anybody, and I don't want it to come across that way. It's just for us to think about, folks. We live in a country where we insist on our freedom of speech. You cannot tell me what to say or what not to say. I have my rights. It is our God-given right. Or is it? Do we have the right to speak at the expense of others? Do we have the right to speak even when our words may hurt the person who we are speaking to or speaking about? Do we really have the right? The world says we do, but as followers of Jesus Christ, I would beg to differ. If anyone had rights, it was Jesus Christ. But the Scripture says that when he was persecuted, when he was brought to stand trial, well, rather than standing up for his rights and saying he had done nothing wrong, rather than calling 10,000 angels to destroy the world and set him free, he kept silent. He surrendered his freedom of speech for you and for me. Paul says in Romans 12:2 that we are not to conform to the patterns of this world. The world says you have the right to speak your mind. But the Apostle Paul says that we are to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Before you speak your mind, consider this. Has your mind been transformed? If it has been changed to reflect God's love for people, then the things that come out of your mouth will be different. Rethink your freedom of speech. The second guideline to taming the beast is to lead with your ears and follow with your tongue. As James said, be quick to listen and slow to speak. Sometimes counting to 3 before you respond can save a lot of heartache. Think about it. Take a little time. The third practical step I would encourage us to take is to bite our tongue more often. A DJ working in a radio station has a little button on the soundboard that allows them to block out something that came across the air. It's a little delay. So what you're hearing on the radio isn't actually live. There's a little delay built into it. And they have the ability, the DJ does, that if somebody says something, they can hit the button and it won't go out for us to hear. I often wish I had a delay button of my own. Sometimes I respond too quickly. As Lene can tell you, there's times when I'm not listening to what she's saying, but I'm speaking before she's done, thinking that I'm doing the right thing and in actually causing problems. Because it might be that I don't understand what she's actually planning to say, but I think I do. Jesus said in Matthew that on the day of judgment we will have to give an account for every careless word we utter. That should make us think twice before we speak. How many careless words have I spoken this week? How about you? The fourth principle to taming the beast is a crucial one for the life of the church. Refuse to tear others down. The book of James tells us not to speak evil against one another, or in the Message translation, not to badmouth each other. When we badmouth each other, disguise it as gossip, and pretend that it's okay to do, the only people we are fooling are ourselves. The Bible is very clear on the consequences of gossip. One day we will be held accountable for the words we've said. The fires that we've set with our tongues, James says, comes right out of the pit of hell. I don't know about you, but I'm frightened of being used as an instrument to cause damage here on earth, and I need to learn how to tame my tongue. Finally, in light of the damage that our tongues do, and in light of our need to tame them, I want to encourage us to surrender our tongues. James says that no one can tame the tongue. The truth is, we cannot control our tongues. I do not have the ability to tame my tongue, and neither do you. The only way that we can use our tongues to build others up rather than tearing them down, and to build the kingdom of God rather than being used as a pawn to destroy it, that kingdom, is by surrendering our tongues to God. If we say, yes, I know I've got a problem. I'm sorry for hurting others, and I want to use my tongue to give praise to God and build up others instead of doing any more damage, God will help us. If you want to tame your tongue, as I do, then let me encourage you to think about some speech therapy. Before you speak something that may be harmful, ask yourself these 5 questions. First, is it true? Is what you're going to speak the truth? If not, stop. If it is, second, is it something that necessarily needs to be said? Just because we know something doesn't mean we have to say something. Jesus said you are going to be judged for every careless word. Bite your tongue more often. There are so many things that we say that are not necessarily. Third, is it beneficial? Is what you are going to say going to build someone up or tear them down? Is going to do good or is it going to hurt someone? Fourth, ask yourself, do I have permission to share it? I am sure you all know people who consider friends who you can tell anything to because you know it will stop there. However, we also know people who are the first to spread that news all over town. Before you speak, think about what kind of friend you are being. Finally, ask yourself, is my motive pure? Why are you saying what you are saying? Most of the time when we gossip, it's for selfish purposes. We want something to talk about. We want others to think we are important. Do you know that the need you have for gossip? It comes from sin. Give it up. My mother-in-law, Jan, read me a little thing yesterday in the car coming over here. It was a little response from a young man that when she was working in a school in Grand Junction as a teacher's aide, this 4th grade boy had gotten help and gotten kind words from him, and it had stuck with him. It helped him when he was in the Navy. It helped him as he went into an apprenticeship and became a journeyman out in the world. Kind words can help. You never know what you may have said to somebody many, many years ago, how that may help that person someday in their life because you're kind to them. As we close this morning, I want to say one more thing. I know that we all struggle with our tongues to some kind of degree. On a scale of 1 to 10, a severity, whether you are 1 or a 10, it doesn't matter. We can all do something about it. When you hear someone speak something about another person, rather than listening, stop them in their tracks and tell them that you don't want to hear it. If you need to, remove yourself from the situation. It's time that as Christians, we begin behaving as Christians. If we can get our tongues in line, there are folks out there in the world that would realize more about what we really are about than what they think we're about because they've listened to something that has come from somebody. Will you join me in rethinking your freedom of speech? Listen more, bite your tongue more, refuse to tear down others, and surrender your tongue to Jesus Christ. This is not some extra thing that God is requesting of us. This is something He's asking everyone for being a disciple. We have no choice. If we're to be His followers, then we must behave like them. Because if we do not, one day, we will be held accountable. So please, join me and think about it. Let's see if we can tame our tongues and be more Christian than the people out there think we are. Amen. Please join me in the Apostles' Creed.